it just, these months keep evaporating. My husband Ben and I, my dad always says, like, if you think your life is moving fast at your age, just wait till you're older. And it's really true. I'm 56. It feels like life is going really fast, and it's going faster than when I was 40. And there's actually a reason for that. And I just recorded content for Forged on Purpose about it yesterday. But you'll have to join Forged on Purpose to understand neurologically why that happens. So this is my great friend, Pete Foldis. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thank you, Dr. Barber.
Uh-huh. And Pete and I have the pleasure of getting to know each other through Multiplier, which is one of Garrett Gunderson's mastermind communities. Actually, I think one of his only big ones. And so it's been awesome. We met each other. We've had several conversations, and Pete is up to really cool things in his life. One is he is developing a tool for neuro financial alignment, and writing a book called Fulfilled AF, which, get your heads out of the gutter. It actually means fulfilled, aligned, and flowing. So, Pete, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for the introduction.
Yeah,
Opportunity to share some with you today.
yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. Why this neurofinancial alignment? Give us the why. And you have quite a resume that's quite impressive. So my philosophy has always been it's not bragging if it's true. So brag it up. Let's hear who you are.
I appreciate it. That's a good philosophy. I'll have to think some more on that. Now, overall, you ask, let's go back to where it all started.
Yeah.
My background from an education standpoint is in psychology, massage therapy, mind body wellness. I was an athlete, and trained at the highest levels with some of the most elite athletes during my time, which now is quite some time ago. That all being said, I became a financial advisor. And when I did, it was after working across 60 different jobs, many different industries. And some might see that as uh, not focused, not clear. It was actually quite the opposite, full of clarity and understanding step from step. Each time I went into a role, it had a purpose. It had a reason why I was doing that role. I worked for professional sports organizations. I had different entrepreneurial avenues that I went through. Worked in other jobs and ascended from low-level worker to management. And across all of those experiences, even teaching in middle schools and teaching from kindergarten and newborn preschools up to adults. And as you know, some work I do with universities at the college level, Eastern Michigan University volleyball. What
So
always
Mom and Becca and Amberly, Eastern Michigan University. So they're all graduates.
Okay, awesome, go
Of
Eagles.
they're
Five
yeah,
of five.
they're all egos. And I'm gonna call out um Cindy and Lori. I mean, I know so many people that graduated from EMU. It's 15 minutes from where I grew up.
Oh, okay, Yipsy. All right, nice,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Well,
Ipsy, no yip. Ipsy.
Ipsy,
Don't go
Ipsy.
there and say Yipsy because they're going to be like, he's an outsider. So
And I'm the Greek, right? I should be saying it that way.
yeah, it's Ipsy.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Uh, so overall, when I got into financial advising, what I really found to be the case is after helping and serving so many people, helping them achieve their financial goals, still get those phone calls of people incongruent, looking for blame, ultimately pointing out things that were outside of their control as the reason why they weren't living their best life yet, even with all of the money, assets, and resources possible. And it really became evident to me that it really isn't the money that's the problem. And you and I talked about this before. The two top emotional factors preventing people from their financial abundance is guilt and shame. So being able to understand guilt being the feeling of letting someone else down, or shame the feeling of letting yourself down, what types of drivers are preventing people from actually achieving what it is they want? And so neurofinancial alignment aims to really get down to the baseline, like you and I were talking about the foundation of the conditioning that happened to us even before we were born, epigenetically, the things that are carried with us and then carried through us as we experience life, the different ways that we internalize our experiences, and how we can ultimately become the driver of our life.
So so let's go back and speed bump guilt and shame as it relates to money and give us some examples from clients of what what they've said such that we boil it down to guilt and shame so
Sure.
that when our audience listens to the story they're like oh my gosh that's me or oh my gosh that's my spouse or oh that makes complete sense I didn't even realize it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked the question because, from a superficial level, something maybe everybody could kind of see, but maybe not relate to them would be like the athletes that you see go bankrupt or go for broke. Or we all hear about the lottery winners that find a way to watch all those millions of dollars evaporate. Of
Yes.
course, on a sad, in my opinion, a more sad level, that inheritance, because to me, why that's more sad is there wasn't a structure of culture and values that were shared generation to generation, where those inheritances were a gift rather than a curse. And so those are things that I think people can definitely see, but from an everyday level, even just saying, oh, well, I want to build my business, but if I do that, I won't spend time with my kids.
Okay,
If I
so I have
spend
to be
time,
paused for 1 second because
sure.
I have to type something that's coming up for me that I don't want to forget. So just 1 second. Uh, okay, so continue on. No, I won't forget that.
I hope it was
Keep
good
going.
stuff. Um, so from a standpoint of everyday life, right? Hey, I want to increase my finances, but if I do, then I have to sacrifice time with my kids. And then you feel guilty. Or if you are at work and you're doing those things and the kids are left alone, or vice versa, you're with the kids, but now you're letting down the people that work for you or that you're in projects with. That's an easy kind of example of where that give and take is, and we say, oh well, we'll let that go. But there is a world where you can do both and where ultimately thriving happens and you're able to excel in all of those areas of life and still live fulfilled. So those voids aren't running you.
Though those emotions of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
So, um, do you find commonalities with individuals who are in the guilt camp versus the shame camp?
Ultimately, I'd say the commonality is the perception of good, bad, right, and wrong. So one of
Okay.
the big things that we focus on is neutral thinking. If we talk about the law of polarity, which you and I were discussing before, we know there's always going to be the exact opposite at any given time. You talked about emotions, right? So one thing that I was confused by as a child that I have a lot more clarity on is life is a process of the pursuit of happiness. Well, if that's our pursuit, then consider what's on the other side of that pursuit. If we're always seeking happiness, then what do we end up experiencing is the sadness. It's always going to be there. And so when we have these types of judgments, right, wrong, good, bad, especially when we let other people's judgments affect our belief systems and place value on our own understanding, which is why knowing your own values is so important. Ultimately, that becomes the barrier where we're no longer in love and appreciation. And love and appreciation is right here in the middle, right where the heart is, right? Ultimately. And so if you can be objective, if you can stay neutral, it's a big thing we talk about with sports and athletes is staying neutral. My one of my mentors, Trevor Moawad, is high caliber coach with top performing athletes. It's always about getting to neutral, understanding that events happen, they're neither good nor bad. It occurred. What are we going to do next? What's our next option? How do we go from here? And being able to operate out of that space requires clarity because when shit hits the fan, excuse my language, right? Ultimately, there's only going to be one choice. And those that excel, those that achieve, those that persevere and can persist are able to do so because they have clarity, vision, purpose, and understanding of something beyond just what's right in front of them.
It in this in this discussion is neutrality synonymous with being grounded?
It could definitely be. I think when you're grounded, there's a lot of clarity, but emotions can ultimately skew where that grounding is. I've seen people perception of grounding meaning they're positive all the time and they think it's one-sided. The way they show up, the way they speak, and to them that's the embodiment of what grounded means to them. And they haven't quite crossed over that step, that line of saying, yeah, I'm grounded and I'm rooted deeply in what this clarity is. And I think there's a little bit of a difference that happens when some clarity is missing, right? Some of that clarity of, and that comes from injection of what it's supposed to feel like to be grounded, thinking that you're doing something because that's how you think it's supposed to be, rather than just having that knowing and that centeredness.
Is is neutrality this right here, right now? Like I think of an athlete, like let's say, so I pitched, right? Fast pitch. And I walked that person, right? Like part of success on the field is being able to be like, okay, they're on first. Here's the next batter, right? It's being right here, right now. I'm not thinking about last inning. I'm not thinking about the next inning. I'm being right here, right now. Is that the understanding of neutrality that you're speaking of here?
Well, so what I heard from what that example was is being present, right?
Yeah.
And so if we were to take neutrality, one thing that I struggled with in different areas of kind of conceptualizing what this looks like, does it mean we take the emotion out of everything? Does emotion just go away? All of a sudden, are we just walking through life never feeling anything? And that's not it either, right? That's actually quite the opposite, because if we're not feeling, then we have already created a judgment someplace that's creating a polarity for us one way or the other. And so kind of like what you said is like, okay, that happened. What's next? Now what's our objective? What's our new plan? And how can we move from where we're at with clarity forward? And I think that's something that's translatable to business, to family life, to athletics, to finances.
So is it have we talked enough to for you to have an understanding of thinking on it? Like I just don't have a lot of thinking on it. On I'll give a for instance.
Okay.
So yesterday I was getting ready to go film Forged on Purpose, which for those in my audience who don't know, it's the online course for my books. I wrote these books to be a catalyst for life transformation. Um, I if you start reading my book after about, I don't know, 10 pages, you'll be like, oh, this isn't just a get through to the end. Like, this is I gotta slow this down and really get some understanding. And I'm guessing that Fulfilled AF is probably quite similar, that this isn't a turn the pages and just sip coffee to get to the end, right? And so Forged on Purpose is to take these concepts a step further. The concepts in Two Streets Named Hard have really become my battle cry of how my life has transformed so much over the last 2 years. And so I walk through then how do we do that? And the big theme is myelinating the gap, right? Your big thing is the neurofinancial alignment. And how do we do that? So um in in going through that, we create so much unnecessary suffering, in my opinion, of having coached chiropractors for past 30, almost 30 years. Of we subject ourselves to so much suffering because we have so much thinking on something, right? We have so much thinking on, well, this is just the way my family handled finances. So that must be my prison in going forward. Like as a family, we just didn't talk about money. So it's almost like, well, I, of course, can't talk about money, or, well, that's just who I am. I'm just somebody who flies off the handle. That's just who I am. I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert, as if we're suddenly not neuroplastic anymore. Right. And so it's the thinking on parts of life that really create suffering in my opinion, it's because we fail to recognize that no storm permanently damages the sky. And by storm, I mean thought storm, right? Like I can, as a pitcher, get really upset at the umpire whose strike zone is like this, and it seems very subjective based on either who's on the mound or who's got the bat in their hand. That's just a thought storm. I have a lot of thinking on that. But if we're able to just surrender and recognize that that thought storm isn't personal, it's not permanent, it frees us up to live in imagination and expansion.
Absolutely. And a lot of what I heard in there, right, is experiencing, facing the resistance, understanding that there's resistance there to begin with, especially when I talk to someone around finances. They don't want to hear about the things they did wrong. They don't want to hear about the people that wronged them or the different things that have gone wrong, but they do want to point the blame and they do want to
Okay.
offset that. And so there's beyond the resistance, right? We have the awareness that comes up, which you always are talking about with different sessions there. And so, the thinking on it for me, what I heard in there was like, all right, well, now that that's a big part of what you see, where are you creating and perpetuating the cycle? Is that
And define resistance in this context. What is resistance?
well? So, for instance, I'll give you an example for me. Typically, I
Yeah.
show up to different events or learning opportunities, and I've never been shy of raising my hand and contributing. And
Yep.
I found myself at a place a couple months ago where I went 3 days and I never raised my hand once. And I was like, why is this? What is it
Okay.
that I feel a resistance about speaking up? And then I proceeded to go through that. And the only reason why I enrolled in the offer at that event was because I knew that there was some resistance. I don't know what it was from. I don't know why it was there, but I recognized that it existed and I wanted to break through it. So I put myself in a position to be uncomfortable, to go through that process. And the resistance was the awareness of saying, knowing myself well enough and then being like, there's things here that I want to do, but I'm not doing them. For an athlete, right, the resistance might be training alone, training when no one else is watching. I think one of the things that gets confused when it comes to athletics is emotion is a example or an illustration of how much you care, how much it means to you. And of course, for every professional athlete out there who we're all watching and paying to watch, they spend millions of hours. They spend a lifetime of hours doing whatever it is they're doing with nobody watching. But we don't grade that. We grade the performance. We grade the 90 minutes that they're on the court or the field or the ice, right? And
Mhm.
that gradement, that judgment is constantly happening and swirling. And they hear it from the crowd, they read it in social media, they hear it when they get home. And as kids playing sports, there's so many things broken with youth sports today based on the way that training is or isn't happening, how the reinforcement's happening, what's that doing to a child's brain, and how they're creating their identity based off of those experiences.
Well, I mean, labeling and stratification is across all avenues, right? Like you didn't get an A, you got an A minus, right? So that starts setting up structures and we get that dopamine of you're such a good girl, you're such a good boy. It's like, I want to do that again. That felt really good neurochemically, right? So it makes complete sense why a lot of us, especially high achievers, we are performance and production junkies, right? Addict. Like
And something that's
I
become something's become popular is the concept of trusting the process. And there's so many people that are like, well, what does that really mean? What process are we trusting? And that's where neutrality comes back into play. One of my favorite interviews that I saw, my Greek freak friend Giannis, post finals, post basketball season, reporter asked him, was this season a failure because they didn't win the championship again? And of course, the idea of failure. Are you taking an experience that didn't live up to your hopes and expectations or the standard that you set as a failure or a process in the road, a process to getting better? And I think those types of frameworks at every step of our day, even as parents, on a very small level, how did we show up for our kids today? There's so many ways to reinforce a child that people may not even be aware of, right? It doesn't have to be a good boy, bad boy type of situation. It can certainly just be like, I recognize this in you, and saying something as so much as, wow, that was brave that you did that. Wow, that was really, really special that you did that. And I see that this is what you did. It's interesting because parents will often say, I'm so proud of you that you did XYZ. And pride is actually an indication that you feel like you're responsible for their actions, right? Which, as a parent, that very well could be true. But also, when someone, maybe a child, is super nice to another kid at the playground, just acknowledging them. Wow, it's really great to see how nice, how you treated them. It was really what great behavior. I would love to see that. And even when I said great behavior, there's a characterization and a judgment that that was the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Some of those things across the way is just being able to become more neutral in the way we talk, the way that we praise, the way that we even criticize or curve and reiterate to a child what it is we hope to see from them.
I think you're onto something here. And I wonder what it might be like for not only children, but us as adults that just have more miles, but we're still really kids, right? That instead of interjecting my perspective about that child's behavior, I wonder what it would be like to be like, hey, little Johnny, how did that make you feel when you were so kind to, your new friend on the playground? For them to do introspection instead of us reporting to them, which is just our video game, right? Like we're all not really living in reality as it is. We're living it through our sometimes beer glasses,
Yeah, right.
rose colored glasses, or whatever those look like. And instead, just really slowing down. Like that's something that's helped me so much in my relationships is number one, I truly believe that everyone is doing the best they can given the thinking that appears real to them.
Absolutely.
Right? It makes sense then why that person responds if that's their thought about it. Right? Like,
That's how they learn to respond, right? Like they were taught that's the proper response, the socially acceptable way to go.
yeah, or if you're from this camp, this is how we view that, right? And so we take on that identity. But it's really interesting when we can step back and not make other people's comments or actions about us because it's not about us. Even when um my parents taught us at a young age to say thank you for a compliment because that person isn't really telling you anything about you per se. They're telling you what their lens is in looking at you, right? Or whatever that happens to be that. So it was way easier, at least wise for me, to not take things so personally because the
Well,
reality is it's not personal.
it's interesting because, right, anything you can see about someone, good or bad, however you want to frame it, you can only see because it's in you somewhere. One of the hardest things to do is to actually take a minute back and all the things that you're maybe critical about somebody, or maybe you're like, hey, they did me wrong, and then be able to reflect and think about the times that you did. Because most of the time, when I ask people those questions, they say, oh, I'd never done that. I would never do something like that. Right. And now we start talking about the moral high ground, and morality is based in human law. And what I try to focus in on is universal laws, things that are indisputable that we all live by when it comes to
Right,
things that are just how they are, right? The
right. Capital T
morality,
truth.
what's that?
Capital T truth.
Yeah.
Right? But we often live in lowercase t truth, which is our beliefs and our habitual thinking and our irrational thoughts and those thought storms, which is not to say they're wrong. It's just when we can have an understanding of, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Like that's just my wiring. Oh, that's his wiring. Oh, it makes complete sense then that that would be the outcome.
And now you're in acceptance instead of trying to change somebody.
Yes, just neutrality, right? Would that be the same thing, right? Acceptance and neutrality.
And so when I hear about acceptance and being neutral, I really think about love because love is the affection and the acceptance, regardless of all the things that you may not agree with or believe in, right? So if you truly love somebody, you're loving them for everything, right? You're loving them for even the things that you may not love. And if you truly love them deeply, there is no gradient of love. It's either unconditional, which means you love them regardless of the bad, or conditional, and it's really just a transactional situation.
Right. Which obviously the unconditional love, really the only, in my opinion, the only being that can do that is God. That as human, we can say I love you unconditionally, but our brains just really aren't wired so much for that.
I would just say that the flip on that, or like the next level, is to like my spouse, like my Jordan, my wife. Yeah, there are things that I don't that aren't like how I would do it, but that's where the perfection is. The perfection is loving that that's who she is, and I love everything about her, right? And Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, and I always laugh about it because he talks about his wife who died, and he's like, she used to fart and wake herself up when she was sleeping. But I
Oh,
miss those days. Those are the things I miss. I love that. Like I wish I could have that again, right? Something that you would never really think about until after the fact. But if you can find that little monologue with him and Matt Damon on the bench, it's like a perfect illustration of like of true love, despite. And I hear what you're saying about God, but I think there's a human element of us where in those moments of grace, when we can get as close to being in grace and in divinity and representing and illustrating that type of love on earth, that's when it comes through.
and maybe it's God is always unconditional love. It's his nature. Whereas humans, we can and we do pick and choose when we're going to exercise unconditional love. I want to go back. Remember, I said when we were talking about guilt and shame and money, um,
Yeah.
I said I wanted to make sure I remembered this. Let's talk for a second about um, the individual who earns a lot of money and maybe even has a high net worth and still feels broke.
Mm.
Still feels like regardless if it's $1 billion or $100, it's never enough, whatever that that looks like, right? Like I still feel like, oh yeah, we just took a $30,000 vacation, but I'm still worried about money. Like and you've heard this from clients too. I just want to get to a place where I don't think about money. And I'm always like, oh, young Padawan, you must not really understand money. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, for you say understand money, first and foremost, money is a tool, right? It's something that we share in terms of belief system, I think undoubtedly, right? Something that Garrett in Multiplier talks about endlessly. And the real understanding I think that happens, and I talk about this in Fulfilled AF, because it's the exact same situation, right? When it comes to an athlete making millions or a billionaire CEO, one, let's first talk about the ceiling. Right? You're going to earn as much money as you have a purpose for, right? So if you don't have a purpose for the money, I know high earners that have been in 10 million a year every year for a decade, but they haven't exceeded that level because they don't have a purpose earmarked for it. They don't have a reason to do it in their mind. There's that concept. But then what you talked about from a standpoint of fulfillment, the money is a tool. If we're looking to have more, to be more of who we want to be, then it's always going to lead to a lack of fulfillment. Ultimately, that's why knowing your values is so important. From our voids, the things in our life that are a void in our life, relationships, mental capital, financial capital, we have our values. Now, when we talk about relationships, first and foremost, the relationship with yourself. Then, obviously, the five people you spend the most time with is going to be kind of second. Who you're always around, whether that's family members, work, whatever it is. And then, obviously, the different layers that extend beyond that, and how those relationships are actually centered around nurturing a common vision, a common goal, a common output, or is it all transactional? And the difference between going from wealth that's transactional to transformational, one is having purpose, foresight, understanding. Carnegie said most men won't ever understand their legacy until 100 years after they've gone. Why?
Mm.
Back then, of course, they didn't have the idea that information could travel so fast, but also the impact is only understood to the degree at which our those around us are still speaking about what we did after our time. Right? So we go into kind of legacy. Now the billionaire that has all the different things, right? The submarine boat, they can go look at the ocean floor if they want to. They have everything. It goes from having the construct of once I'm going to do all the things it takes to have the things that I want to be the person that I want to be, or I'm going to have the things that I want to have to do, then I'll do the things that I want, then I'll be the person I want to be, versus ultimately being the person you want to be, showing up, living into your values. First and foremost, having your value-based decision making across all areas of your life, especially when you get into a situation where you have multiple different choices. Maybe it's on the same day, the same time, whatever it is, and you get to say which one aligns with my values. If the one that is the most related to money is where your value is, but you have more money than anybody could ever spend in a lifetime, that's probably not going to be the thing that's fulfilling to you. The thing that's fulfilling, that's going to fill as many voids as possible, which is the process of fulfillment, is to be able to actually go back and see what's true to you. And so that billionaire that's always searching to fill that empty hole is likely not going to find it until they actually realize what's important to them. And maybe they never will. I think about, as we talk about this, I just read an article, Scotty Scheffler, golfer, one of the best golfers right now. He just won the tournament. He just said how golf does not fulfill him. One of the best golfers of all time. Made $56 million last year. Just won a third major 2 days ago. A few days ago, right? Then we have Musk and we have Nvidia tech CEO, and he's sitting there saying, "I got a $4.2 trillion company. I know there's no work-life balance. I spend 100% of my time thinking about business." Well, there's a void there. Now, what that void is, I couldn't tell you, but there's something that has not allowed them to feel big enough in their world, right? Or they just have an ever-growing desire to impact an ever-growing number of people. But when you do that, that's where you start to find fulfillment. And maybe they do have fulfillment. I don't know them well enough to know one way or the other.
Right.
What I find with those people that are not fulfilled with that money is because they're searching to fill gaps in their life that money can't fill.
Yeah. Hmm. And sometimes that can feel very scary,
Yeah.
right? To actually have to look at, oh, wow, this is the thing. Like I've been saying over and over again, kind of like a brandable chunk that you and I were speaking of earlier. I legitimately chased success, believing that freedom was at the finish line. Like when I get to this level, then I'll finally feel free. When I finally get here, then all of these things will magically happen. And, you know, it's so interesting coming from the perspective, and it's honestly something I'm still like processing through and wiring through, because the accumulation of money has always been an order to for me. Like when I have this much money, then I'll finally say, good girl, Barbara. When I finally get to this status, then this thing, that whole in order to. And it's the misunderstanding about where our experience of life comes from, right?
And it's
Our
set up by the time we're little, and it's everything that's we're told is going to be the case. It goes back to goals, right? We put a goal on it. Maybe that goal is a financial goal. And this is what I talk about in the book. This is what you and I have talked about. I was 25 and I had made my first million. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be happy all of a sudden. Life is going to be great. And of course, the
right.
money didn't do it. So you set these goals that are in time and space, and then you reach them, and then it's not fulfilling. The same way why Scotty Scheffler spends 4 days beating everybody in the field, winning millions of dollars, and he says, I celebrate for 5 minutes. Then it's like, all right, what's next?
What's next? Yes. And that's that whole wiring in our brain, that there's a misunderstanding about what that is, right? Like then I assume for most, because this is what's happened with me and lots of clients I've talked about and people I've read about, is then we say, oh, well, maybe it just the goal was too small. Maybe
Yeah,
winning my
I,
third title was
I
just
wasn't
not
thinking.
big enough,
I wasn't
right?
thinking big enough. I got to go bigger.
Yeah. Or like, um, Tim Grover and his book Relentless gave us a model for this. Like, you're a cleaner, you're a closer, or you're a cooler. Oh, well, that settles it. I'm just a cleaner. So that's why I'm never satisfied. Oh, I'm just a this. Now that I have, we see it in healthcare all the time. Like, oh, finally, I have the diagnosis. I have Hashimoto's. I'm now all good. And it's like, nothing changed about your health when you got a diagnosis, but we've been so programmed, get your label. Oh, Finally, I have adult ADD, ADHD. That changes everything. And it's so interesting that from a human perspective, we do that. We so want to be able to identify with others who are like us, which brings me back to something you said that I don't know that I see talked about that often, but it occurs to me that it's an important conversation to have, maybe on a different call since we're already like an hour in. But I feel like we could have this conversation for a really long time.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting how the who you spend a time with has radically changed. And I just want to highlight this, and we won't go further on it, but who are you listening to all of the time on this? Who do you follow on this thing, whether it's an author or a podcaster or a group of people? Because don't discount that that group of people are who you become. You may spend time with your family, but are they really influencing who you are as much as the strangers that come through this thing into your world? So, what do you have to say about that? And we'll conclude.
Well, I think whether it's through the phone or just through social settings, I guess what's coming up for me in thought is kind of the college age and younger, because around them, those are the folks that right now they have it all through social media. But to stand out, any version of life, right? To stand out, you have to perform and operate in a different level. And the people that are making the most noise about staying small are the ones who feel uncomfortable when you get bigger. And so as you rise and ascend into being the person that you are meant to be, the people that are closest to you are going to question why you're doing it. I just
Yeah.
told you about an experience I had the last couple of weeks where I was in class for 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day for 10 days straight. Most people are like, why would you do that? Their eyes look like yours. Why would you subject yourself to that? Well, if learning and then teaching what you learn is one of your highest values, it doesn't feel like a mental, emotional, and physical drain. Now, of
I
course,
just think of Miller's Law. Sorry, I'm just stuck there. Go ahead.
so the point is overall, when you look at what voice is the loudest, that's where it goes back to one, values, and two, clarity. Because the people that don't understand what you're doing, they aren't the ones that are going to foster the growth. And there may be silent support, which is fantastic to have. I typically think about that coming from family members who want to support you but don't know anything about what it is you're trying to do, so they just root you on. They're in your corner, right? Then there's the people that kind of try to discourage you. And I had a friend who wanted to go play basketball, go shoot some hoops, and he's the type of person that would encourage me to keep going down my path rather than name calling or telling me why I should go play hoops with him, right? Supporting my pursuit, understanding what's
Okay.
important to me rather
Yeah.
than trying to bring it down. And I think that happens so much every single day. And I think that's what pulls us away from eating well, from sleeping well, from overall exercising and being consistent in our life, because we have all of these consistent distractions that are telling us and influencing us what it is we're supposed to be. I think the smallest example, and there's nothing against astrology, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but you were just talking about wanting to belong. And so we have the social structure, this familiar understanding. And when we try to break out of that, and I mentioned astrology because people are always looking for little clues, cues about who they are and what they're meant to be. And they're looking from it from astrology, they're looking from it from a Myers-Briggs test, from any sort of personality profile to tell them who it is they're supposed to show up as, rather than being clear and understanding who it is that they want and believe deeply in being. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things I experienced recently was with someone that I was trying to do work and collaborate with. And all of the feedback that they've got in their life has been from other people telling them what they should do or how they should be. Ultimately, the roles that they thought was right for them really has nothing to do with what they care most about. It just was whatever
Yeah.
told them.
Yes. Well, and I think, it's kind of like the question, what do you want? It seems so basic, but what a difficult question for most to answer. Um, and and if we haven't learned to listen to that still small voice, it's really easy just to get caught in the noise. And the noise of our head about who we're supposed to be. But here's what I want to encourage people about. If you'll get quiet and look at the things you're most drawn to, they will reveal your values. Like Pete just said about being in class 10 to 12 hours for whatever, 2 weeks. And if he was able to just like check in with himself about emotion and how he was drawn to do that and how it was easy to say no to other things so he could say yes to that, that then reveals his value of education. And what was the other part of that you said within
Then
education?
from
Learning.
learning to teaching.
Learning and education, whether he's the educator or he's being educated, that comes out necessarily in the wash of, oh, that's a really high value of mine. Like a really high value, Mo and I from Multiplier, we're just talking about this last week, is fun. Like I cannot imagine at the end of a day not being like, hot damn, that was another fun day. Like that, I mean, you can tell by my expression and my body language. Like I can't fathom not having fun every day.
Why would you do it anyway if you didn't have to, right?
I,
It's
and yet in our conversation, he was like, I bet if you asked everyone in the group that we belong to, how many days a week are legitimately fun for you, or are fun, it would be a very small percentage of people who say, yeah, absolutely. Like I honestly don't remember. If I spent more time, I could maybe come up with it. The last time, I know what isn't fun. Airplanes. I don't enjoy it at all. And no matter how many things I try and bake into them being fun, it's just something I have to go through. But that value of fun has really colored my yes and no, right? Like it's got to be something pretty big to get this girl on an airplane and travel to the lower 48. Now, get on a float plane to travel to my cabin. Oh, that's dreamy. Get on a helicopter to do a 13-hour ride to my cabin instead of 5 hours. Oh, yeah, that kind of flying, right? But like, if we just will slow down and like this idea of neutrality and groundedness and really start observing ourselves without judgment, you'll probably be able to figure out your values much easier. So Pete, as we wrap this up, what final words do you have for our audience from this conversation, because there are going to be many?
yeah, there's so many things we'll have to hop on again soon. Overall, one of the things that I think stands out, I think a word that constantly is coming up in social media is authentic. What does it mean to be authentically you? And I think in that pursuit of understanding, one thing that I come across often when we're talking about values, and you just actually said it. What is demonstrated in your life reflects what your values are. Where the incongruence, where the unhappiness lies, where that cycle of feeling like you're on a hamster wheel you don't want to be on is living incongruent with those values, ignoring what you truly love, care about, and want to demonstrate versus what you're currently demonstrating. And that polarity of what is versus what you want to be is where the struggle is. I think ultimately understanding that the transcendental, transcending up into things like freedom, money, all the things that people kind of identify with was like, oh, well, I can't have this until I have money. So money's one of my values. Much different than that. What's demonstrated in your life? And then we know from the value creation cycle, money's just a tool. The more value you add to the world, and I know it was hard for me to really figure out what adding value meant. When you can add so much value and give abundantly with no expectation of anything in return, that cycle of value will always come around, and money always follows value. So if you ultimately put that into play with your work, with your purpose, those things will develop, and it requires patience and clarity to see it through.
Yes, I'm so glad you said those last two things, that success isn't a soda pop machine, right? It's not like, oh, I deliver value and I put in my value quarter and boom. out it comes. It just it doesn't
A
work
few years
like that.
later,
At least
yeah,
wise, in my opinion, fulfilling satisfaction, right? Like there are ways that we can shorten that distance, and usually they demand a lot of time and money, like ads or things like that. But we when we're really looking at value creation, there is a patience and time element to it that's really easy to get frustrated. And I always think of childbirth. That transition time is so critical to getting the birth that you want. Of who are you, who will you and your birth partner be in transition has 100% impact on the outcome of the birth,
beautiful.
if you're willing to stay into that. And it relates to success too, the birth of what you most want to bring into this world, your legacy signature. So, Pete, thank you so much. I'm already excited for our next conversation. And to all of you, thanks for joining in on our conversation today. If Pete or I can be of help to you, please reach out. Like asking the question and asking for help is the doorway that is wide open to you right now. So choosing to stay stuck or frustrated or confused, it's 100% a choice. I'm saying my door is open. I know this guy well enough to know his door is open. So let us start a conversation with you by reaching out. And then we'll help you determine what that's going to look like walking together. So Pete, thanks so much. I hope
Thank
you have a very blessed day.
you too.
See ya. Bye.